Hello, everybody. Welcome for joining us at The Crunch. I'm Corey. This is Howard. And today we're talking about villain games. Are they fun? Do they work? Let's have a discussion.
Sometimes. The main thing, really, in my opinion, is planning. But before we go into that, we want to talk about the different systems.
Yeah, there's been several different games that have tried villain game or antagonist games. Basically, what a villain game is instead of playing the heroes, you play the antagonists. So instead of playing, we did one here on the channel. We did Orcs of Thar, where we all played orcs instead of playing the adventurers that defeat the orcs.
I was a terrible villain.
Well, you even had a problem. You were like, I thought that we were just playing orcs. I didn't think we were playing bad guys. We were just playing orcs. So
yeah, I was looking. I had the World of Warcraft mentality, where we're not necessarily coming at this from a different point of view, and apparently I was the only one who thought that. So I was like, "Oh no, y'all are just assholes. Look at you go." I'm sorry for my language part. Sorry, that slipped.
I have run several different villain games. I've run a couple for Star Wars. I've run some for Dungeons and Dragons for the orcs. Pathfinder has Weeby Goblins, where you play goblins.
I haven't heard of that one. That sounds fun.
Yeah. So the first time I ever came upon the idea of a villain game was an old West End Star Wars West End games back when they were doing the D6 Star Wars. This was back in the early 90s, and they came out with a book called Heroes and Rogues, which basically had a lot of templates in it of things you could play. And it had a bunch of rebel characters, it had a bunch of gray characters, mercenary kind of characters, like bounty hunters and that kind of stuff, smugglers like Han Solo, and then it had a bunch of Imperial characters. And you saw that, and you thought, wait, we can all be Imperials? What a novel idea. Let's all play the bad guys. And that's the first time I really thought about that as an actual game type. Unfortunately, I've never had a villain game go 100%. The Orcs of Thar worked. I don't know if it really worked. It wouldn't work as a campaign, and they never work as a campaign. The thing with all of these...
Well, you saw how that one ended with my character running off on the others, stealing the prize, and at least one of the two others vowing to kill me in my sleep as I left.
So the problem with all of these games is when you get Weeby Goblins, or the Orcs of Thar has an adventure in it, these games work well as a one-shot single adventure that is supported and grafted around a single mission that they have to accomplish. Once you start going outside of those parameters of the mission, people just want to do crazy stuff.
Evil. They want to do evil.
Yeah.
You give them the point. You say, hey, you're the villain. I think it's almost like this weird psychology falls upon the person who's then impress the other players at my table with how horrible of a villain I truly am. The sheer horror. They start thinking back. I will have a cave where I trap women to save them for later. I will have, and you're like, what is wrong with you? Why are you doing this? And how does this make the game fun for other people? And truly, that to me is a problem. When everyone's playing villains and describing the horror of their character, I don't see how that makes the game fun for other players, except to all go, ooh, now I have to try and top that, which led to, in a Sabbat game...
Explain to people what Sabbat is and why that's a villain game.
They are the evil vampires from Vampire the Masquerade.
Thank you. They actually came out with a supplement book for Sabbat, showing you how to play Sabbat characters as player characters.
I ran the Sabbat venue for our LARP thing for a while.
Mind's Eye Theater. It was, for people that don't know, there's a club out there called the Mind's Eye Theater, and it runs Basically, Vampire, the World of Darkness. I don't know if they're doing Requiem or The Masquerade or what they're doing right now.
Last I heard, they do both.
They do both. And it's a club that is at least nationwide in the United States. It's probably in other countries.
It used to be global. I assume it still is. It's been global. It was global for a long time.
And when Howard talks about venues, that's what they call their different themed...
different settings.
Yeah,
one is all evil vampires. That's the Sabbat. The good vampires, the Masquerade. Well, when I ran it, I did notice that even though I was running it, it still devolved into I'm more evil than you. Our old friend Roy played the La Sombra, which is a evil vampire clan, who stole babies and would fling them at people and at buildings and at the Camarilla vampires, which are the hero vampires of that venue, because they would have to try and save babies before they could stop him. And even if they couldn't save babies, they'd be so horrified they might have to make humanity checks, which is an issue for that venue, and become less human. And Sabbat don't have humanity, so whatever. Which is way too much to explain for this video. Just saying that it got to a point of ridiculousness where there's no way to run the game effectively. It's not hard to imagine someone who has superpowers of becoming invisible, teleporting through shadows, etc., going and stealing babies. You would just hope that you don't have to deal with the player that does it. Because it becomes very hard, because, the city would be on lockdown if that occurs, and when you're running a game in a global setting where there are people in other cities trying to run congruent games, and in every game you have people doing things that would be worldwide newsworthy, you're like, okay, how come so that it's not worldwide news in my city every single time we have a Sabbat game? And it was very difficult. It got to a point of frustration where I was like, you know what? I think this is more fun to play than run. I'll step down.
Like, there's an entire group out there that doesn't care about the Masquerade at all. Then there's no reason to have a Masquerade to begin with.
Absolutely. The Masquerade, for those that don't know, vampires aren't supposed to reveal themselves to humans. That's the premise of Vampire the Masquerade. So in the Sabbat venue, obviously, the evil vampires are like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah. And the reason you don't reveal yourself is because there are actual powerful humans out there that can just kill you, or werewolves, or other things.
Whereas the Sabbat aren't supposed to want to do it, because they believe that the first vampires, called antediluvians, are going to wake up and kill them. Supposed to respect the Masquerade too, but you can't convince players of these things.
Yeah. So there's a game out there called Kobolds Ate My Baby, and it is a very tongue-in-cheek kind of game where you play kobolds, but after every die roll, there's a chance you can just straight up die.
Yeah.
And you have like a death counter, and for every death you have, you can get bonuses to your rolls.
I actually saw that at my local game store, and I really liked it, but I was like, I don't know anyone that would play this with me, and I don't know that we would ever do it more than once, so I did not spend the money.
I kind of, there's a lot of tongue-in-cheek humor in it, so it's more about being funny than being evil. So I think that's a really interesting way to go, and a really fun way to go. There is another one. Oh, what else am I thinking of here? The Reverse Dungeon.
Oh, where you're the monster trying to stop the heroes from coming in and, foiling your dungeon.
Yes, exactly. And they kind of do it in a novel way where you don't level up. Like, as a hero, you level up. But in this game, when you gain enough experience to level up, you simply take over the personality of a different monster with more hit dice.
That's interesting. I actually never read how Reverse Dungeon worked. I just knew the basic premise.
And it's done in 3 levels where you're a monster from each level. The Goblin level, and then even more tough level, and then the Lichdom at the bottom, where an evil Lich has taken over. And your job is to stop the PC, or not the PCs, but the adventurers.
The heroes.
And this game works on the same premise as all of the other games. It works very well within that one microcosm. But if you take these people out into the real world, suddenly things go off the rails pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think for structure, we're talking a lot about the system. I mentioned the systems for D&D. For the D&D purists, you want to look for the Book of Vile Darkness. It came out originally, I believe, 3rd edition. I know it was reprinted for 4th. If it's not out for 5th, I'm sure there's some fan has tried to convert it. A lot of stuff from 4th, you'll be surprised, doesn't need much conversion to work in 5th. Book of Vile Darkness had templates to play all the monsters or monstrous people like necromancers and such, and it lets you be the bad guys. And it included all sorts of things that really upset people, like how ritual sacrifice should go and how to work these things into your stories. And there was a lot of just vile darkness in it. Imagine that. So if that's something you want to do, is set up that kind of campaign for D&D, you want to look for the Book of Vile Darkness. But when I'm talking about setting up your game, what I would say is to look at things that do work. Like, for example, there's a recent DC movie, and of course the comics for Corey and I, who are old DC fans, for Suicide Squad / Strikeforce X, I think is what they also called it when they couldn't say Suicide.
Task Force X.
Which basically, Task Force, that's it, Task Force X. Thank you, sir. There is someone in control that is forcing the bad guys to work together, whether they like it or not, or their heads explode. Something of that degree that forces them to be good-ish and work together for fear of insta-death. Or, you've got blackmail material on them, or you're threatening their families who they actually do care about. Because not all villains are necessarily straight-up, sociopathic murderers. Some of them I'm a villain because I want to make life better for my family, so I started stealing, or I started murdering, or whatever, assassinating people because it pays super well. So if you do that, if you force the characters to work together, but with a controlling agency, the upside is you'll have a group of villains that will work together. The downside is they still won't do anything like if Corey's character is dying and I'm an absolute jerk who has zero care about other people dying, I may not bother to take that extra action to save him, which is not a problem really in a hero game because heroes will do that. And another option to make these games work, and I find this works really well, is just have a threat so large that even the demons, or whatever it is the people want to play are like, well, wait, what's his name wants to destroy all of reality? Well, I live there. So I have to stop him too. And then you have your villains coming together. You just have to find a motivation that forces the players, even if they are super evil, I want to the world, go, well, no, in this instance, I'm going to work with these guys and we're going to solve the plot.
That's not a tack that I have actually taken in any of my villain games. I tried to use cultural motivators. Because in Orcs of Thar, there's a lot of culture that they write about for these orcs. In Star Wars, when you play the bad guys, they actually have... the Empire has protocol and things you have to do in the structure of their military. The problem arises when the player characters, when the players don't care about that.
That's exactly the problem, which is why I didn't go that route. That's exactly the problem.
They simply don't. And when you punish them for not doing it, they take it as a personal affront, and they look at you like, what do you mean? I thought this was an evil game.
That is absolutely a problem. I see your issues exactly. When we talked about the Sabbat briefly there, one of the first games that we ran was a live action role play system, and they had like this big ceremony, and they wanted each Sabbat member that was coming into town to step forward and introduce themselves. I walked in. I decided that since we were a pack of evil vampires that were very combat oriented, I walked in with a limp, and I described that we had come from New Orleans, and I had like a Cajun accent, which is bad, and I won't do it for you because it might insult someone. But I walked in, I explained how we fought our way here and who we had killed and all these things that we did, and my was impressive enough that I was immediately awarded a status type thing, which I don't remember what it was called. It's been way too long, which made some of the other players go, "Oh, we can do that. because in the live action game nobody cared and they just gave out status, and the game quickly devolved into each person that stepped forward introducing themselves and then adding on with their story and how awesome they were and the weird, evil, depraved things they did. Whereas mine was, I just basically was like, we fought our enemies, we survived, bam, we came through. It got into, and then we like ripped off their heads and we wore their heads, and then you're like, what is wrong with you? Do you have issues? These games will quickly devolve, and if you want to run a villain campaign, you might be able to make some awesome stories with it, but they quickly devolve. Yeah, you need players that understand the outset that you're not looking for a game, that you want a game that makes a good story. You don't want something that devolves into, I'm more gory than you are, because, Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees aren't working together. They're a bad team up. You need to come up with concepts that, for some reason, will work together, even if it is, what's her name? Amanda Waller has put bombs in your neck. For some reason, you're gonna work together.
Thing is it starts turning into punishing players for doing evil, even though it's an evil game, and that can get frustrating for the players, because then they're like, I thought we were playing an evil game. Why is it every time I do something evil, bad stuff happens to me? That's not fun.
To be fair, in real life, when you do evil things, cops come for you.
I know.
People don't like you. Bad things happen to you when you are bad to people.
It's very true.
What are we supposed to be like? Yay, you're evil, and the peasants rejoice.
Yeah, but actually, people see it that way. People, it's not about the peasants rejoicing. It's more of a power trip fantasy for them. They think that they're Darth Vader or the Emperor and can just get away with everything because they're in charge or something.
I think the issue with that is when you look at the super evil characters that you admire from Legends, like whether it be Star Wars or He-Man.
Look at that.
Skeletor actually did have a team of people that worked for him, and the only thing that made that work was Skeletor was. And I realized that the show was super corny, but Skeletor was more powerful than all of them. He could zap them with his staff if they got out of line, so they would work together. Even though each one was his own brand of evil and wanted to do mean things, they did it because Skeletor, their leader, was even more evil. And if everybody plays with that concept, maybe that would work. Just, hey, y'all are evil, that's great. There's an evil boss that has come to town and said, hey, work for me, we will all be rich. Don't work for me, and I'll kill you. Oh. Well, and if people are like, well, I don't like that. Well, you're not supposed to like it. You don't have to like him. You just have to work for him or he kills you. This is an evil game, not a nice game.
Well, on that, I think we'll wrap it up. Thanks, Howard, for talking to me about the villains, and everybody who's watching this, if you enjoy this, subscribe, like, hit the bell to get notifications if that's your deal. I don't know. I find them annoying, but YouTube wants you to do it. So do it!